So it turns out I got a video that hit over 100 views, which is like crazy for my little channel that, when you're starting out. And it was, maybe not so surprisingly, it was a video entitled Tulsi Gabbard. I think that obviously right after the debates, people were out there looking for information on her and seeing other people's take on her. And I was fortunate in that somebody jumped in onto the comments and dropped in a couple of different links to, one's her campaign video, which is about 20 minutes long. It was really pretty good to listen to. And then another link to her interview, most recent interview with Joe Rogan. And I like Joe Rogan generally. I mean, I think sometimes he misrepresents some things, but I mean, I generally like him. I've listened to a lot of his podcasts. So I'm listening to that now. I'm about midway through it. And again, she says a lot of things that I really appreciate, and I think that we disagree on a few things. But I mean, ultimately, against the other candidates in the Democratic Party, she's hands down, I think she would be my call. As I'm saying, amongst all the other Democratic candidates, she's hands down the choice I would make, or the one I would want running up against Trump. And in that way, I think there's no way in hell she's ever going to get the nomination. They're going to Bernie Sanders her so hard if the Democratic electorate doesn't get up and like raise holy hell about like this. These are the kinds of ideas we want, and all these other people, this Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and all that other Elizabeth Warren, all those other deeply entrenched political creatures. Like, you just don't put them up there, because along with myself, a lot of people. Well, she and Rogan are talking, and they're talking about how Trump was able to kind of get people to buy into him because his what appeared to be sincerity or a genuineness to it. Like I think they mischaracterize him as being immature. I think that but Rogan's like, but he's a comedian. I think that he is with President Trump is off the cuff a lot, and he's had 70 years of being off the cuff in front of cameras, and he's pretty good at it. But that sense of humor is not what people expect to see from a president. They want to see all presidential. But at the same time, you really don't want somebody putting on the president act and then not being a genuine person. So I think what Trump was able to do is come across as very genuine, even though it wasn't presidential. People wanted genuineness, and I think that that's an overarching thing that this new internet, social media generation is kind of sussing out. I don't really want actors. I want genuine people. It's the reason why most of the podcasts I listen to are podcasts like this, where he's just a guy in front of the camera acting, just talking like he normally talks. I don't put in for a lot of like bombastic or personalities. I just like hearing normal people give me their opinion so I can kind of form my own. And I think that in some ways Trump's able to do that. Now, whether you like his personality or not, another whole argument. And again, I've always said I don't really necessarily care what their personality is, so long as they get the job done. Now, the other thing that I think that in this interview, Tulsi Gabbard and Rogan are kind of also not getting correct is her assessment of what's going on with Iran and the Middle East. Like everyone knows, right? If you're paying attention at all, I'm as anti-war as Gabbard is. I love everything she says about these wars of aggression and the military-industrial complex, but don't forget, Trump himself said the same thing too. He called out the military-industrial complex on, it was like a CNN interview or something like that, where he was sitting down and he's just like, you don't understand. Here in Washington, people here love wars because it just feeds their pocketbooks. Like, he called it straight out. He called it the military-industrial complex, and I was blown away.
That's the way I want it.
So you can reassure people you're not looking for some kind of conflict in Iran and...
Well, I'm the one that talks about these wars that are 19 years and people are just there. And don't kid yourself, you do have a military-industrial complex. They do like war.
So Gabbard's not the only one saying it. Trump is saying it as well, which is great. I love that both teams are saying that, like both parties. So anyways, I think they mischaracterized what he's doing with Iran. I think is a bit of chicken, but you can't. I don't think you can approach it in any other way. Like, they need to be stared down. You can't when you're up against a bully, right? You can't run away. They'll keep on chasing you. You've got to stand firm and strong against it. Now, whoever throws the first blow has lost. If we throw the first blow, I think we lose. But in some ways, you could say, with the downing of the unmanned plane, they've already thrown the first blow, and Trump was like, that was nothing. I'm not going to react to it, which I think is also great. Like, the people say he's got no diplomacy, but they threw a punch on his face, and he was just like, yeah, no, that wasn't so bad. I'm not worried about that. Like, he blew it off, recognizing that it was just a bit of name calling in a sense, and he doesn't need to really, like, have any kind of wild reaction to someone calling him a name. Again, I think it's pretty good. But regardless, I want a good candidate. I want two good candidates to pick and choose from each other. I want both candidates to be saying things like push against the military-industrial complex. Oh, the other thing that I don't really know yet about Gabbard is her economic policy. I'm not down with socialism, right? Obvious. Maybe that's not obvious, but there's a lot of reasons why I don't back a socialist system on a national scale. I get small-scale community giving, and sharing of things, but as you get further away from a responsive electorate, the less and less power that government entity should have, because it's just not responsive. What does somebody in Washington writing a policy care about the guy who lives in the middle of Iowa, or the guy who lives in the middle of Nebraska? They don't. So you want to have that body have less power than the body closest to them, because they can shape and vote out the local policymakers. So I don't think a wide scale, and I'm for individual rights well more than I'm for the rights of group politics. Because again, who is leading that group? Who's laying down, this is what our group thinks? I don't think that's fair for one person to stand up and say, I represent it, unless it's elected and they've got some kind of checks in it. But generally, that's just like somebody standing up and saying, all of people who are like me, everyone who has a beard feels like we should, do away with Gillette shaving. Like I can't say that. I don't represent all those people who have a beard. Maybe that's a bad example. That's right. I'm not very polished in all this stuff, in case you haven't caught on. But regardless, I think Tulsi Gabbard is a great candidate for the Democrats, and will therefore not get past too many more debates. I understand that her campaign is completely funded by donations from people. She takes no PAC money, which again, another great thing. And I would love to do away with campaign, I would like to revamp campaign finance reform. So if you're in the mood to have a good debate season between Democrats and Republicans, I would say, donate to her. I'm saying neutral, right? But I would encourage you to take a look at her campaign and maybe decide if you want to donate or not, because I think that she makes a lot of good points. Economically, again, she didn't touch on the Federal Reserve. Oh, she did shout out against pharmaceuticals companies, which I think is great. So on top of and again, another reason why I think she won't go very far, sadly. But she, stood up against the pharmaceutical companies and the opioid epidemic that we're facing here that nobody really wants to talk about. She also takes quite a fair shot at the media, and how the mainstream media is completely, in the pocket of the what you call, I guess, the deep state or the entrenched establishment. That she's not getting a fair shake with the mainstream media. I thought it was funny with her talking with Rogan, and Rogan mentioned some company, I can't remember the name, but now that disproved, or no, that showed entirely how the Russians were affecting the last election. And she's like, well, that company you're talking about that released that report, they're also the same company that said that I was working with the Russians too. So I don't know that I trust their information. And Rogan, he should, if he didn't feel bad, he should feel like an ass, because he completely was backing this company that was that she was calling a company that lies, discredited information broker. So and Rogan too, I like his show, and I've had some of the guests that I guess I like his guests more than I necessarily like him, because he cusses so much, so unnecessarily, that I can't play that with my kids in the car, right? I would if I'd like to be able to get this information and even let my kids listen in. Not that my kids necessarily care. Regardless, it's just, I forget who it was that said it, but cussing just gives people who don't want to listen to you a reason to not listen to you. And I think Rogan, he does it too much. I think he does it now. It's just kind of part of his vernacular, but I think he could probably do better to knock it off. Anyways, I've got an hour left of the interview, so maybe they touch on the Federal Reserve, and maybe they touch about the banking system. Maybe they talk about, she does a fair amount of political answers to questions like, what would you do in this situation? Well, I'd stand up for my morals and I would be honest. I'm like, yeah, okay, but what would you really do? Like what programs would you enact? She's talking about, they were talking about unemployment. and disparity. Oh, it was disparity in wages. She's for like I don't buy into this either. This raise minimum wage, right? Just go ahead and government order a rise in the minimum wage. Well, that I do believe that will economically harm a lot of small businesses, because if they could afford to pay people that kind of money, they would, and they can't afford it. And it's artificial price fixing, which never. The market should decide how much money someone gets. I guess where I totally understand that people are struggling to make ends meet. The problem I don't think is necessarily you got to pay them more. I think the problem is you got to get hold of inflation and again put sound money in place, not fiat money that keeps on getting inflated over time. It was a good talk I heard yesterday, not about Gabbard, but about the idea if you threw like $5,000 into a savings account or into investments, 10 years ago, and you go to pull it out now, and you've made $3,000 in profits. Now you've got it's worth now $8,000. The stocks are now worth $8,000. You pull that money out, you didn't necessarily make $3,000, right? Because if the cost of everything has come up, you might have made $2,000, maybe $1,000, because the cost of everything has gone up. You're not really making profit. The value, inflation is the value of the dollar going down, and that's happening over time. And especially, you can't look at it at micro. You got to look at it at macro. So over 30, 40 years, that house that you bought for $30,000 in 1970, and you sell for $300,000, in 2010, you didn't make $270,000. I mean, you did. But that $270,000 doesn't buy you a whole bunch of anything, right? Comparatively to when what you think $270,000 is gonna, profit-wise is gonna be, because the value of everything has gone, or the cost of everything has gone up so high. The value of the dollar has come down so low. Oh, I'm going into rants. Anyways, I'm very curious to see how the rest of her economic policy shapes up. At the very least, I would be very surprised to see her go too much farther in the race, but I'm gunning for her. I want her to see her succeed. Don't let her get settled into like a VP role, because I think I could see them doing that to put a female on the ticket to make it like Biden and Gabbard, and that will be we'll get the experience of Biden and the fresh face of Gabbard, and then she won't be able to do anything from inside the vice presidency. That I would not settle for that, and I don't think that anybody in my listeners should either. So, anyways, get interested, anyways, or maybe take a closer look and see if you maybe aren't someone who might support her. Oh, that was my bell. I gotta go. Cheers. There was one other aspect of that interview that I wanted to comment on, because I both agree and disagree, and that is the idea that Trump isn't draining the swamp because he's got guys like Bolton, who I find repulsive, in the position that at a seat in his cabinet, that kind of thing. I totally buy. She's right. There are a lot of people neocons that he had to put in place around him, and some of them he fired pretty immediately, and some of them he fired after a while, or recycled new people in and out. But I think that and she would probably run into this very same thing too, were she ever to get elected. The party has a lot of control, right? And as much as Trump wants to portray himself as someone who can command it all himself, he couldn't, right? He had to rely on people who had been in DC for a while, my hope is that he or she would be draining from them what's important, and then letting them go and keeping them on a very short leash, which I think he's doing with Bolton. I think that Bolton is there to kind of scare the Iranians, because he's such a warmonger, that it helps to bring them to the table, because they've got somebody who they know has got no compulsions about bombing the crap out of them and killing innocent lives. And I feel like Gabbard, as much as I'm optimistic for her as well, I think if she ever found herself in that seat, she would find herself surrounded by the Bidens and the Clinton acolytes and the Obama acolytes, who again are all swamp dipped creatures, and she would just be having to defend like what I think Trump has had to do is defend himself from both parties for a large amount in the last 2 years. I think it's lessening now. I think he's got more control over it now. But you have to remember the Republican Party did not want Trump, and they were, including the Bushes, who voted against him. Like he was not welcome at all by that party apparatus. And I think Gabbard would probably find herself in a very similar place and have to rely on people that I would find distasteful. And I think it's to Trump's credit that he's able to actually survive and get things accomplished that I feel are good things, like not go to war with North Korea and not go to war with Iran yet. That I'm not convinced that she'd be able to do it, though I'd be hopeful for her. Anyways, that was the last part I wanted to kind of mention there too, because I think I both agree and disagree. All right, now go about your business. Do something else besides watch videos all day. Come on. Oh wait, but buy a t-shirt first. So you like movie quotes, and you got to be dressed anyways. Why don't you check out my Threadless store and get all the Earl t-shirts you can handle.